Imagine this for a moment. A sharply dressed man strides into my courtroom, glances around, notices everyone standing for the judge, and decides to sit right down. Arms folded, a smug little grin. Like he's watching a performance he's too important to clap for. That was my introduction to Vincent Morrison. It happened on a blazing Thursday morning in July. One of those days when Providence feels like it's been left too close to the sun, and everyone's patience is hanging by a thread. Around 8:30 a.m., I was going through my docket, nursing a cup of Christina's famously strong coffee, real Italian brew, the kind that makes your eyes open a little wider, when I spotted his name. Vincent Morrison, 17 traffic violations in 3 months. 17. At first glance, it might not seem earth-shattering, but trust me, it was just the beginning. Those violations weren't harmless slip-ups. We were talking reckless driving, excessive speeding, blowing through lights, behaviors that showed a consistent pattern from someone who treated the rules of the road like optional suggestions. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked into the courtroom. Christina announced, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Caprio," and as expected, the entire room rose to their feet. Everyone except the man sitting in the front row. Vincent Morrison. "Sir," I said gently, "please rise for court." He turned toward me, slowly, like I had interrupted something far more important, and said, "I'm comfortable right here, Judge." In that instant, before I even addressed a single violation, I knew this wasn't going to be your typical traffic matter. People talk in a city like Providence. Business owners talk. Court staff talk. Even other defendants talk. And everything I'd ever heard about this man lined up perfectly with what I was witnessing right then and there. This wasn't a one-time display. This was a lifestyle. The entire courtroom froze. You know that moment when something so out of line happens that the whole room stops breathing? That's exactly where we were. In 4 decades on the bench, I had never seen someone show this level of disrespect unless they were intoxicated or in crisis. But Vincent? He was neither. "Mr. Morrison," I said evenly, "standing for the court isn't optional. It's a sign of respect for the law." He laughed. Not a soft laugh. Not an embarrassed laugh. A loud, dismissive, almost mocking laugh. "Judge," he said, staring at his polished nails like he was reviewing them for defects, "I've been standing all my life. Today I'll sit." Standing all his life. This millionaire somehow believed that the simple act of showing respect in a courtroom was beneath him. I glanced around and saw hard-working people, retirees, parents juggling jobs and kids. Folks who understood that respect is something you give because it matters, not because you're forced. "Mr. Morrison, I warned one last time. I'm asking you again to stand and observe the rules of this court." That's when he did something that still turns my stomach. He leaned back, laced his fingers behind his head, like he was sunbathing, and said, Make me, a grown man with $50 million to his name telling a judge to make him follow basic courtroom etiquette." The level of arrogance was astonishing. I stepped up from the bench, something I rarely do, and looked directly at him. "Mr. Morrison," I said, my voice cooling with every word, "you seem to believe your wealth excuses you from following the simplest expectations in this room." "My wealth," he answered, still sprawled out like he owned the building, "excuses me from many things, Judge, including taking orders from civil servants." Civil servants. He reduced a judge with 40 years of service to the equivalent of his personal employee. The level of disrespect in that room was so heavy you could practically feel it in the air. But what truly lit a fire inside me was what I saw behind Morrison. Just a few feet behind him sat a young mother, gently rocking her baby. Try her best to keep the little one quiet, so she wouldn't disturb the courtroom. She looked exhausted, like she'd taken a day off she couldn't spare, probably arranged childcare she couldn't really afford. Also, she could deal with simple traffic violation responsibly and respectfully. A few seats away, an elderly veteran slowly removed his cap. He stood tall, well, as tall as his aching back allowed. You could see pain flash across his face, but he stood anyway, because to him, respect still meant something. I even saw a couple of teenagers, kids who had likely never stepped foot in a courtroom before, standing there with more composure, more understanding of decorum, than this 50-year-old millionaire sitting smugly in the front row. These folks understood something Morrison clearly didn't. They knew that respect has nothing to do with how much you earn or how expensive your watch is. It's about recognizing that in this room, everyone stands on equal ground. This courtroom isn't a marketplace where money buys influence. It's a place where justice doesn't care what's in your bank account. Mr. Morrison, I said, settling back into my chair and folding my hands, the way you're behaving isn't just an insult to this court. It's an insult to every single person here who understands what basic human decency looks like. Basic decency? He scoffed, turning to look at the rest of the room as if he were surveying subjects in some medieval kingdom. The expression on his face was pure disdain, like these hard-working people weren't worthy of his time. Judge, he finally said, I employ more people than anyone here. I pay more taxes than all of them together. My businesses pump millions into this city. I think I've earned the right to sit when I'm tired. Earned the right. To him, success wasn't just a blessing. It was a license to ignore the very system that safeguards his wealth, his assets, his reputation. He genuinely believed his money bought him freedom from the simplest gestures of courtesy. The young mother stared at him in disbelief, jaw slightly open, baby in her arms. Here she was, struggling to keep her life afloat, still showing perfect respect, while this wealthy man acted like politeness was somehow beneath him. Mr. Morrison, I said carefully, your financial accomplishments don't grant you special treatment in my courtroom. The law applies to everyone the same, those with plenty, those with little, and everyone in between. The law, he shot back with a sneer sharp enough to wake the dead, is whatever people like me decide it is. We sign the checks, we fund the campaigns, we shape the policies. You really think this tiny courtroom matters to someone like me? We make the rules. At that point, it wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was a declaration, a belief that wealth placed him above the law, above accountability, above everyone sitting in that room, in my courtroom, in front of citizens who lived their lives the right way, who honored the rules even when it was inconvenient, who treated the justice system with respect. And right then, my thoughts went to my father, Giuseppe Caprio, an immigrant who came to this country with rough hands and a strong back. He worked whatever jobs he could find, construction, factory shifts, overnight security, never complaining, never expecting the world to make things easy for him. He respected authority even when that authority didn't always respect him back. He taught me early that a person's character is not measured by their income, but by how they treat people who have nothing to offer them. Standing there, listening to Morrison talk about making the rules, the contrast couldn't have been sharper. My father would have been embarrassed to stay seated when others rose. He would have been ashamed to speak to a judge with anything less than complete respect, even if he disagreed with every word, and that, more than anything, showed just how far apart their worlds truly were. Mr. Morrison, I said, rising once more, you're about to discover something very important. Money can buy a whole lot in this world, but it cannot buy you protection from the consequences of contempt. Contempt? He actually grinned, as if I just delivered a punchline. Judge, you want to see contempt? I could purchase this entire courthouse and pave it over into a parking lot. I could pay your salary for the next decade and barely notice the dent. I could buy your job if I felt like it. By my job. In that moment, it was painfully clear. This man truly believed everything was for sale, including the judicial system, including the seat I had dedicated 40 years of my life to honoring. That was the moment I reached my limit. Mr. Morrison, your refusal to show even the smallest measure of respect is contempt of court. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Morrison to a holding cell until he's ready to behave appropriately. Officer Rodriguez, a solid, steady man with the patience of a saint, began walking toward Morrison. Morrison looked at him as though Rodriguez were something he'd scrape off his shoe. You can't be serious, he said. And for the first time, a crack appeared in that wall of arrogance. You can't arrest me for sitting. I'm not arresting you for sitting, I replied calmly. I'm detaining you for deliberate, intentional defiance of this court's authority. By then, Rodriguez was right beside him. Sir, he said politely, I need you to come with me." Morrison's eyes darted around the room, searching desperately for someone, anyone, who might step in, shield him, prove him right about the power of his money. No one did, and when he realized that the room wasn't bending to his wealth, something shifted in his face, a flicker of fear beneath the anger. "This is absurd," he exploded, finally leaping to his feet, not out of respect, but because panic was beginning to set in. "Do you even know who you're dealing with?" "We're dealing with a man," I answered, "who believes money places him above everyone else. And today, he's going to learn otherwise." That's when Morrison completely unraveled. He spun around and started pointing at people as if assigning blame. "You!" he shouted at the young mother with the baby. "You think this circus is justice? This whole place is a joke." The poor woman looked stunned. She'd done nothing but quietly follow the rules, and here he was lashing out at her simply because he couldn't handle accountability. "And you!" he yelled, turning toward the elderly veteran. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching a successful man get humiliated by the system." The veteran, God bless his strength, met Morrison's rage with steady calm. "Young man," he said, voice firm but gentle, "I fought in 2 wars so citizens could stand in courtrooms like this. You're dishonoring everything we sacrificed for." That should have humbled him. It should have made him stop, breathe, and reflect. Instead, he erupted. "I don't care about your wars. Old man." Morrison barked. "I don't care about any of you. You're nothing. None of you are anybody compared to what I've achieved." Nothing. He had just reduced a soldier, a working mother, and dozens of honest citizens to nobodies because they didn't share his wealth. "Mr. Morrison," I said sharply, my voice slicing through his tirade, "you've just shown exactly why you need some time to reflect on what respect truly means." Officer Rodriguez placed a hand gently on his arm. "Sir, please come peacefully." Morrison jerked away violently. "Don't touch me. You have any idea what kind of lawyers I can hire? I'll take your badge. I'll take every badge in this building." And then came the moment he sealed his own fate. He spun back toward me, rage boiling over, and thrust a finger in my direction. "Judge," he growled, jabbing that finger at me, "you just made the biggest enemy of your entire career. When I'm through with you, you'll be lucky if the only job you can get is guarding a mall." A direct threat to a judge in open court with 3 dozen witnesses watching. In that moment, Vincent Morrison didn't just cross the line. He sprinted past it. He had climbed from contempt straight into the territory of criminal intimidation. "Mr. Morrison," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you've now added threatening a judge to your list of offenses. Officer Rodriguez, please take Mr. Morrison into custody immediately." "You can't do this to me," he shouted as the bailiff began to secure the cuffs around his wrists. "I'm Vincent Morrison. I practically own this city." "Mr. Morrison," I told him gently but firmly as his hands were pulled behind his back, "you may own companies, but you do not own people, and you certainly don't own justice." As Rodriguez guided him toward the exit, Morrison unleashed a storm of insults, yelling about lawyers' power, influence, you name it. But then something remarkable happened. People began to rise. The young mother with her baby stood. The elderly veteran rose with dignity, wincing but unshaken. Teenagers, office workers, everyday citizens, one by one, they stood on their feet, not because they were told to, because they understood what that moment represented. Because standing was their way of saying, respect matters, integrity matters, equality before the law matters. "Judge." Morrison screamed from the doorway, still struggling against reality. "This isn't over. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Mr. Morrison," I called after him, "you're absolutely right. This isn't over. You'll remain in holding until you're ready to offer this court and everyone here the respect they deserve." The door closed behind him, and the room filled with murmurs. People shook their heads, whispering about the spectacle they just witnessed. Christina approached my bench quietly. "Judge," she said softly, "I've worked here 20 years. I've never seen anything like that." "Neither have I, Christina," I admitted. The young mother stepped forward, balancing her baby on her hip. "Your Honor," she said gently, Thank you for standing up to him. My little girl was watching. She needs to see that bullies don't always win. Moments later, the veteran approached as well. Judge, he said, voice steady with experience, that man insulted every person who ever served this country. You did the right thing today. For the next 4 hours, Morrison sat in the holding cell. Every 30 minutes, Officer Rodriguez checked in. Ready to show respect, sir? And every 30 minutes, Morrison snarled back demands to call his lawyers, threatened lawsuits, insisted this entire situation was beneath him. But around 2 p.m., something shifted. Maybe the concrete walls finally made an impression. Maybe the bars reminded him of something he thought he was too rich to experience. Maybe he finally understood that money didn't erase consequences. Officer Rodriguez came to my chambers. Judge, he said, Mr. Morrison is requesting to address the court. Is he prepared to behave respectfully? He says he is. All right, bring him up. When they brought Morrison back into the courtroom, he didn't look like the same man who'd strutted in that morning. The suit was still sharp. The nails were still perfect. But the arrogance? Gone. He looked smaller, more human, like the real world had finally cracked through his illusion of invincibility. Mr. Morrison, I asked, are you prepared to behave properly in my courtroom? He stood immediately. No smirk. No excuses. No theatrics. Yes, Your Honor. Are you ready to show respect to the court and to everyone here? Yes, Your Honor, he said quietly. Are you willing to apologize for your behavior? He glanced out at the room, at the very people he had insulted hours earlier. Some of them were still sitting there, patiently waiting for their own cases to be heard. The young mother had already left the courtroom, but the older veteran remained seated in the back. Morrison glanced toward him for a brief second before looking back at me. Yes, Your Honor, he began quietly. I want to apologize to you, to the court, and to everyone present. What I did was unacceptable. It wasn't a powerful apology. It sounded like something his attorney drilled into him during those 4 hours he spent in the holding cell. But at least it was a beginning. Mr. Morrison, I said, leaning forward, tell me, what lesson do you think you learned today? He paused, searching for the answer. I learned that money doesn't put me above anyone else. And I pressed, that respect has to be earned. You can't buy it. And what else? That being successful doesn't give me permission to mistreat people. He said all the right things, but I could tell he was still trying to understand if he truly meant them. Sometimes 4 hours behind bars isn't enough to undo a lifetime of entitlement. Mr. Morrison, I continued, your 17 traffic violations in just 3 months show a clear pattern. You've been acting like the rules don't apply to you, and today's behavior proves it. So here's what I'm ordering. I gave him the maximum fine for all 17 violations, plus additional court fees. I assigned 40 hours of community service with low-income families, and I required him to complete a defensive driving course, just like any other reckless driver. But the most important consequence? I banned him from my courtroom for 6 months. If he received even a single parking ticket during that time, he would have to stand before a different judge, because I wasn't going to deal with his attitude again until he showed real change. Mr. Morrison, I said, you told me earlier that you provide jobs and pay large taxes. Those are good things, and this city benefits from your success. But success without humility is nothing more than arrogance dressed in expensive clothing. Yes, Your Honor, he replied. Wealth gives you chances to do good, not excuses to disrespect others. I hope you use your influence more responsibly from now on. I will, Your Honor. When he walked out of the courtroom, he looked different. His suit was still tailored, his shoes still polished, but the swagger had disappeared. His posture seemed grounded. 6 months later, a handwritten letter arrived in my chambers. Judge Caprio. I completed my community service working with families in need. It changed my perspective. I'm also writing to apologize again for how I behaved in your courtroom. I was wrong to think my success excused disrespect. Thank you for giving me a lesson I needed. Vincent Morrison. And that veteran who'd stayed behind that day? He visited me about a week after the incident. "Judge," he said, "I've been keeping an eye on that Morrison fellow." "Oh, what did you notice?" I asked. He grinned. "Well, I saw him at the grocery store. He was holding the door for an old lady. When the cashier messed up his change, he just waited patiently. No yelling, no show." "That's encouraging," I said. "And here's the best part," the veteran continued. He talked with a homeless veteran outside the store. Gave the man some money, sure, but he also sat with him for 10 whole minutes. Treated him like a person, not an inconvenience. Maybe Morrison really had changed. Maybe those 4 hours in the cell taught him something his wealth never had, that everyone is worthy of respect. My father used to say, "Frank, money doesn't change you. It exposes you. It makes more whatever was already there." Some people use their wealth to build walls. Others use it to build bridges. Vincent Morrison learned a tough truth. Having money doesn't excuse a lack of decency. Because without respect, even the richest person lives a poor life, just one with nicer furniture. I'm Judge Frank Caprio. And remember, money can buy many things, but it can't buy the right to treat people any way you want. Thank you for listening, and God bless.